Hey everyone, welcome to The Race for and Everything, episode 221 on this quite chilly Perth evening. You're joined as usual by Finian and Nolsey. How you going?
Hello. All right, so far. Just having a chill old time.
You still what?
Just having a chill old time over here, you know.
So am I. Nothing quite new to report, so okay, useless banter, let's get on to the show. So we'll start off on a topic.
China!
Yeah, we'll make it a little bit different today and start off with, some stuff on China. So the reason for this is because for the first time in 7 years, we had a Chinese premier visit the country. So second in command in the evil CCP, Li Qiang, I think is how you say his name. So he touched down, went to Canberra first, I believe. When he went there were quite a few protesters. There were quite a few supporters too, though, worth saying, with the Chinese flags out. So the protesters kind of came from a cross-section of groups. There were some people from the Falun Gong, others from the Uyghur community. I think there might have been Chinese Christians
homosexuals like Drew Pavlo.
Well, yeah, I don't know if he made it to that one, did he?
No, he was on the Perth one, which is, it's really, really shameful that I didn't get to greet him. I really wanted to greet Drew Pavlo. I think I would have had a good time if I got to greet him.
Yeah, it didn't occur to me actually to see if he was involved in all of this. Yeah, it shouldn't. Because I mean, that's his whole shtick, isn't it? His whole act is just like anti-China stuff. I mean,
I'm a thinly unveiled intelligence asset for neoliberalism. That's his fucking act.
Well, that's what he is now. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's hard to say if he started off that way or whatever. But I mean, certainly the way he was perceived was as like an anti-Chinese Communist Party activist. You know, for whatever reason, as like a Greek Australian student, why you would want to take up that cause here, I have no idea. But anyway. It was nice to see Joel eviscerate him in that debate a few weeks back.
Joel's been eviscerating on fucking Twitter because he's been stuck between a rock and a hard place. Like, oh my god, migration and diversity is like great for our national security and etc. And then like, oh my god, look at all these fucking like citizens of Australia actively supporting like a foreign threat, a human rights violator, and a foreign threat. Literally, he's like
have anything to do with Chinese migration, would it? Wouldn't have anything to do with Chinese migrating here, Drew.
Yeah, he posted a fucking photo because like, oh, he infiltrated the Chinese protest over here, and he posted a photo, and everyone's pointing out, it was like, look, all the people in support of the fucking CCP are ethnic Chinese. So, and you even fucking talked about how like they migrated here, but like still love their home country. It's like, yeah, guess who they're loyal to, nigga.
Right, even that member for Chisholm from the Liberal Party. I forget her name, but like she owned a company, I think, in Hong Kong that had links to the CCP. So, yeah, those connections are always there. But anyway, look, like they really tried to put a positive spin on all of this. They were both sides emphasizing that although relations had soured between our two countries in recent years, that a new era of diplomacy has begun. Of course, a couple of years ago, we did get a new Chinese ambassador to Australia who is said to be much more pro-Western and pro-Australian. Now we had this visit. This is the most high-profile Chinese political visit that we have had in many years. They're saying that effectively, the trade war between the two countries is over. And that Adelaide Zoo can have 2 new giant pandas. And they actually made a visit to Adelaide Zoo as well. So, it was all very typical, stage-managed politics is what it looked like to me anyway.
A succulent Chinese political debacle.
Yes, is how you could sum it up. Now that said, the main goal of these meetings for the Australian government was actually to have the Chinese ban on Australian lobster lifted. So look, this ban on Australian lobster started back in 2020. Now, this was when the Australian government announced its support for American plans to have a general inquiry into the origins of COVID-19. And I mean, I've always said that seemed perfectly reasonable to me, because we can have a debate about whether or not the virus started in a wet market or escaped from a lab or was a bioweapon or whatever the hell. But, I think we're pretty much all in agreement that it originated in China, somehow, somewhere in China. So it always amazed me, like the hissy fits China would have over countries pointing the finger at the country that's clearly started the virus and wreaked havoc across the world, not just with illness and death, but obviously with all the lockdowns and other restrictions.
All the fucking schizo shit that our government's decided to do.
Right. And so, I still adhere to the adage that China lied, people died. So anyway, putting that aside, there was a ban on some Australian abattoirs and lobster exports. And actually, when Li Qiang made it over to Perth and they had a banquet there, Australian lobster was served as the entree. So there was some obvious symbolism.
Oh, fucking Christ.
being put to work there. But, sorry, we actually didn't get it in the end. Now, the Trade Minister, Don Farrell, said, he's obviously disappointed in that. However, he said that he's expected that even though we didn't get it right now during this visit, I'll read his quote. He said, "I'm now very, very confident as a result of the meetings today and yesterday that these final issues will be resolved very quickly and Chinese consumers will very soon have the benefit of wonderful Australian rock lobster on their menu." So, don't worry. We'll soon be selling our lobster to the Chinese again, according to Don Farrell. Okay, now, did we actually achieve anything from this visit besides the symbolic and a couple of pandas? Well, here's what we got. The China is now offering visa-free entry to China for holidays for up to 15 days.
I'm not going back to China.
Yeah. Previously, just even to have a short holiday of like a few days in China, you still needed to apply for a visa. And, it's not really that was a pain in the ass. It was just a way of the Chinese getting money. Apparently, around about $110 to pay for that visitor visa application. Now, that is been welcomed by many in the Australian community who are of Chinese background but don't have Chinese citizenship or residency.
Citizenship, yeah.
Of course, there's basically what we call the second generation diaspora. And yes, they do have many family connections back home. So, okay, that means that the only real benefit that we got out of this whole tour was for ethnic Chinese people in Australia, effectively. And I guess anyone else who wants like a 2-week holiday to China, which certainly does not include myself.
Not me either. I don't like being in a place where like I'm receiving the same health damage as smoking a pack of cigarettes. I would rather just smoke a pack of cigarettes.
Yeah. Now, in terms of discussions on
yummy cigarettes,
the protesters were obviously there trying to encourage the Albanese government to actually bring up the topic of human rights in China, the persecution of various minority and political groups. Not
Albanese gonna happen, motherfucker. Too many.
Well, apparently there was one thing that was brought up, and that was the treatment of the Chinese and Australian journalist Cheng Li, who was not a character from Street Fighter, but she's, I think, look, when I saw her, I'm pretty sure I remember her speaking with an Australian accent. So I don't think she has Chinese citizenship, although she is definitely of Chinese background. She was in a Chinese jail, I believe, for over a year, accused of being a spy. And of course, the claims are simply that she was a journalist who was critical of the CCP. That could well be the case. I'm not going to say that China is not an authoritarian government. They are. I just kind of think it's not really any business of us to interfere with.
It's just how the Chinese fucking do it. Just be happy that they're not like fucking having like wars again, where like fucking millions upon millions of people die and 100,000 civilians are cannibalized. Like, just be happy we're not dealing with that, China.
Yeah, I mean, historically, this is a very placid China, I guess you could say. And, they're in a period of, I guess, what you could call soft authoritarianism. China has always basically just drifted between hard and soft authoritarianism. And they're on the soft side. At least I would say they would be.
How China behaves is dictated entirely by how many eunuchs are in the government.
Yeah. Now, at a particular press conference, I believe the one in Canberra, Cheng Li did turn up to, as part of media, to report on this. Now, the entourage, who was among the crowd of Li Qiang, basically physically tried to block her from getting anywhere near him.
Body blocking. Yeah, that was fucking hilarious. I love watching that shit. And then she had to go get like cry to an Australian staffer to stop these two fucking Asians from bullying her.
Yeah, so there is footage of it. You can see it where they're clearly like trying to block her. It's safe to say that she was trying to get as close to Li Qiang as she could, because that's a nice photo op. Basically, the closer you can get, the more basically you're sticking it to the Chinese government and say, here I am. There's nothing you can do about it. I'm here in Australia.
I'm a big fan of the yellow government.
Yeah. So naturally, Chinese government didn't want that photo op, and they somewhat succeeded, because they managed to hold it back. So that apparently was really the only thing from a human rights perspective that Albanese brought up. He did make public comments on it. He called the response against her, like physically restraining her, to be ham-fisted. And there was a clumsy attempt, really, to just stand in between where the cameras were and Cheng Li, he said. Jesus, that was an interview on Nova Radio in Perth, our worst radio station.
93.7, we suck ass.
Yeah. And you know what? Even though that's our opening topic for today, that's actually really, I'll have to say, even though there was a lot of song and dance.
Pablo's Tibetan fucking activist friend got the fucking shit rocked out of him, and that's the funniest fucking thing that's happened all week.
Yeah. But no, honestly, this whole tour by the Chinese premier that had so much hype behind it, nothing really came about from it. 2 pandas and visa-free trips to China was really it. That's all we got out of it. All right, let's move on to Israel-Gaza conflict and the rise of anti-Semitism, so-called, in Australia.
Oh, God.
So
I made a tweet us about this. There was this one Jewish guy saying, if you're anti-Zionist and don't want a home for Jews, then you need to be super on your toes about the Jewish diaspora and making sure they're safe and are prospering and are thriving, and in the outside world, it's your responsibility. It's on your toes. And I was just like, dude, fucking white nationalists are in the exact fucking position you are belly aching about as a hyper fucking. Yeah, we live in that exact fucking position, and we don't rack up thousands of dead civilians every fucking month.
Right. Yeah. So, and I mean also, you're the guys, you're the people who opened the floodgates, opened up immigration, and I would say primarily are the ones responsible for the official policy of multiculturalism in Australia. And, now you're dealing with what is basically the visible anti-Semitism of Arabs and Muslims in Australia. And you basically only have yourself to blame for that. Read Brenton Sanderson, The Jewish War in White Australia, if you want to read more on that. But okay, here's one of those goals that Jewish Australians are responsible for, and that is the Labor Senator Fatima Payman. She's a very young senator. She's only 29, and she is doubling down on her stance in supporting Palestine, in formally recognizing a Palestinian state. The Greens actually passed a motion in the House of Reps not long ago to support a Palestinian state. That was rejected, as you can imagine, quite heavily. The Labor Party still opposes such measures, even though, Penny Wong may have said things like, that doesn't mean we won't soon recognise a Palestinian state. But, for the time being anyway, Labor Party is,
soon. How soon? When it really doesn't fucking matter?
Yeah. Okay, so look, she did, and the Labor Party really would not have liked this, but she published an opinion piece in Al Jazeera, widely held to be the Muslim propaganda center of the world. They have their offices in Qatar, I believe. And you know what? I don't mind watching Al Jazeera, actually. They've got some not bad coverage. When it comes to, their coverage of social justice and racial issues in the West, they are cucked as fuck. But, but for other stuff, they're pretty good. It's actually quite a lot like watching Russia Today. Their style of political coverage is pretty similar, I believe. Anyway, in this article, she said that it is imperative for influential nations to take such a position in the face of genocidal acts by the Israeli government. So you see, she is stepping into that territory, or that rhetoric that the Labor Party refuses to engage in. Actually calling what's going on now as genocide. Ed Husick, did refer to it as collective punishment, but they won't go any further than that. She did, of course, also, in that famous press conference she did about 3 weeks ago, end it by saying, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. So she's continuing to be a headache.
Oh my God, that's genocidal.
Yep.
How are the Jewish people going to escape from the river to the sea? No escape.
Yeah. So look, she also cited the recent positions of Ireland, Spain, and Norway to formally recognise Palestine as an independent state, and saying, well, look, if other Western nations are able to do that, then why can't we? So, yeah. All right. Now, here's, I guess, a disappointing story. Here on the Racer, we have been saying for a while now that one nation is a completely spent political force, and, they have a significant Jewish influence now. Just look at the leader in South Australia. Look at bloody Pauline wearing Israeli flag scarves into the Senate. But now the Qatar Australia Party are proving to be the disappointment here. So this is at the state level in Queensland, which is, of course, where they derive most of their support.
Are we racist? No, please don't accuse us of being racist. No.
Look, they do that. And look, that big nose on Bob Katter is not for nothing. He is part Lebanese. But anyway,
Goddamn Menorahs.
Outside the state parliament, there was a pro-Palestine rally. Two of the members of the Qatar Australia Party decided to act as counter-demonstrators, basically. So they went up with kind of the protection of the police and held up signs, or I think actually it was just one sign that simply said, "Condemn Hamas." I watched the footage of this. It was actually quite heated. One of the guys actually like reached in and grabbed one of their signs, like not the one that said "Condemn Hamas," but something else. And there was some hysterical woman who just kept yelling shame at them. So anyway, both of those men were, this was Robbie Katter, the party leader, and yeah, he is Bob Katter's son, and also Nick D'Amito, were the two at this counter-protest. So they were both referred to the Queensland Parliament Ethics Committee, and this was basically for engaging in disorderly conduct. Now, that's not because they, were out protesting. Of course, politicians are allowed to do that. But the fact that this was outside of Parliament House and they served, to be agitating a crowd, they were kind of saying, not the time or place to be doing it. And they were ordered to make an apology to Parliament. So Nick D'Amito did regret or express regret over the incident, and he said that his actions were ill-conceived and ill-considered. He said, "I take this opportunity to offer my unequivocal apology to the House for any indignity I have caused to the Queensland Parliament as a result of my actions." On that same Friday, though, Robbie Katter was absent from Parliament. I'm sorry, I haven't looked into this any further. I don't know if Robbie Katter has since issued an apology, but he is required to, according to the Ethics Committee. Or I assume there would be other consequences involved for him. When it means now that when we look at, I guess, what we call the dissident right as it is represented in Australian Parliament or parliaments, we're not finding, a pro-Palestinian voice or simply what you could say an anti-Israel or anti-Zionist voice. It's just not there anymore, even though, dare I say, that many of their supporters, many of the voters of Katter's Australia Party and One Nation would actually, yes, take an anti-Israeli position.
I mean, to be fair, we're not going to be happy with politics until the debates between Hitler, moderate Hitler, and super happy world Hitler.
Well, look, those who might express those views, who are members of dissident right political parties, are simply not in Parliament. They don't have the support, like the Australian Protectionist Party, for example. I hate to say, but they'll probably never make it. They'll never get any seat in Australia, which is a shame. I mean, I look at their policy platform and I agree with pretty much everything that they say. But, they just don't have the momentum that they need.
Yeah.
Okay, so perhaps the biggest story of the week for this topic was the attack on the office of Josh Burns. He is, of course...
this is the face of modern-day Nazism. That was the fucking worst take I've ever seen. They literally just fucking sprayed over this Jewish dude's face and wrote fascist under it. Like, yeah, it was totally 100% neo-Nazis that did that. We're just actually just giving him a compliment.
Yeah, so look, if you don't know, I mean, if you're listening to the racer, I'm sure you do know, Josh Burns is Jewish. There are still quite a few Jewish members of the Labor Party. There might be more, actually. It's always been pretty evenly split.
We know why that's the case, though.
Yeah. I mean, they want to. It's kosher sandwich. They want to have both sides.
Yeah, they want to be out in front of something. I wouldn't be surprised if fucking Burns comes out of nowhere. If the fucking Israel Gaza conversation gets any more out of hand than it is. I wouldn't be surprised if he just comes out and in support of Gaza and the Palestinians just to be in front of it, just to be in front, like fucking spearheading that shit, to fucking throw it right into the ground like they did the street protests and Aboriginals.
Yeah. Well, look, if you missed it, what happened was police say it was 5 people who attacked the office, broke windows, spray painted slogans on it, including Zionism is fascism. I believe they spray painted that over his picture on the windows. They also set it on fire. It's all on film too, actually, if you want to go have a look at it. So it was, fairly extensive property damage that they did. Perhaps the worst that they've done. We know this isn't the first. There's been a number of attacks on MPs' offices, and I believe most of them have been from the Labor Party, which is why, the Labor Party joined the coalition in condemning some of the rhetoric that's been going on, and in particular condemning the rhetoric that has been coming from the Greens. They are saying that if there's any words that are stirring up such actions and prompting these attacks on the offices of MPs, well, it's coming from the likes of Adam Bant and the rest. Just to read what Albo said about this. He said, for some people, they feel very strongly about issues in the Middle East, but it's no reason to target MPs half a world away in Australia. And in particular, the targeting of a Jewish MP is very distressing. So there we go. Albo is directly tying the issue of Jewish ethnicity and the Jewish identity of Josh Burns to the attack. And he's basically saying, like, hey, this guy's a Jew, so you need to leave him alone.
Basically, hey, motherfuckers, you're stepping on a landmine here. I know you see this dude as a white guy, and you've been able to push around white guys in the past, but you don't know there's a fucking huge landmine right below the surface. It's going to blow your fucking legs off.
But look, this is the same kind of rhetoric that Peter Dutton would use, and again, it's just showing that, the Labor Party's rhetoric, to the extent that it's sympathetic to Palestine, is limited, extremely limited. And if that wasn't the case, they wouldn't be targeting their offices, and Muslims wouldn't be trying to turf them out of all the red ribbon seats in Western Sydney. It just wouldn't be happening. So any kind of overtures that they may be trying to make to appease the Muslim population in Australia, or those who are pro-Palestine or pro-Palestine activists, is not working in the least. So the chair of the Anti-Defamation Commission, Davir Abramovich. So here's what he said. Another day, another sickening and evil act of anti-Semitic vandalism, this time targeting a federal member of parliament because he is Jewish and a supporter of Israel. Okay, I'll just pause there. Just what you said before, that this attack, some people are making it out as if it was done by neo-Nazis or something.
Drew, for starters,
well, Pavlov is saying that.
Yeah.
I did check his Telegram channel briefly the other day. I've noticed the pro-Israel stuff. He's really ramping it up lately. He's probably, got the same kind of funding that the likes of Destiny has got. So, for every post, he probably earns a certain amount of money. Or that could well be the case. But anyway, what I was going to say was, what kind of neo-Nazis would spray paint the phrase Zionism is fascism on a window?
It's true, so he's a fucking retard. So, yeah, can you tell that I fucking hate him?
And
I'm gonna pull a fucking Liam Neeson and stroll around Perth City on the weekend and the weekend nights, looking to greet him.
Look, I also do not agree that it was that he was targeted because he was Jewish. He was targeted because he is one of the more vocal pro-Israeli supporters within the Labor Party. For example, when Labor chose to abstain in the UN vote, I believe, what was it, calling for the ceasefire or I can't remember. It was an anti-Israel resolution anyway that was recently passed by the UN. Australia decided to abstain. Oh wait, no, sorry. I'm sorry, I'm getting this wrong. They voted for it, but Josh Burns wanted Australia to abstain. So Josh Burns has been going against the Labor Party line to the extent that it is insufficiently pro-Israel, at least by his own standards. And he's been doing a lot of meetings with the Jewish community lately, trying to assure them that the Labor Party is still on their side and all of that. That is the reason Josh Burns was targeted, okay? Because he's
it was because of him actually opening his mouth.
Yeah.
Trust me, I think that if they had some conception that it wasn't just him opening his mouth, that it was him being ethnically Jewish, it wasn't actually a policy statement or some kind of reassurance that he gave, that they target him because he was ethnically Jewish. I can't see that happening in 1,000 fucking years. They always like to say, we're not actually targeting the ethnicity of Jews when we target Israel. It's like, well, congratulations, you kind of fucking are. I don't think they would have done it. For starters, they don't have the spine, and two, they don't have the ideology.
These people would be doing things like attacking synagogues if that was their motive.
Yeah.
If you wanted to actually kind of hit Jews.
Now, the Arabs kind of are.
Well, yeah, and I have no doubt. Like I've said before, man, Arab and Muslim anti-Semitism in this country is a real thing. It absolutely is. And yes, it does often cross the line into what you could call extremism or violence or whatever. Yeah,
it's also explicitly ethnic.
Yeah. But, that is part and parcel of living in a multicultural society. I mean, what did that mayor of London say? I'm sorry, I forget his name, but he was a Muslim. He said basically that acts of terrorism are part and parcel of living in a major city. And it's like, no. They're part and parcel of living in a major multicultural city. So if you've got ethnic groups who share the same country, share the same territory, and they hate each other, that shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone. All right. And the worst of it is definitely coming from Arabs and Muslims. Now, police said that since October 7 of last year, they've actually dealt with, in total now, 197 such incidences. So, incidences involving vandalism and arson and, destruction of property, etc. And that would sound just about right to me. Remember, some of them have still been perpetrated on pro-Palestine activists, like that burger joint that went up in flames. The Jewish community was very, very quick to jump on that and say, no, this has nothing to do with the conflict whatsoever. It's like, really? This guy is a Palestinian?
Oh, yeah, Avi Yemeni's... Avi Yemeni basically announced the fact, he stuttered during an interview, therefore he's faking it. I'm just like, dude, this wasn't a fucking grease fire, my man. This ain't burnt out windows. This is the entire front of the shop on fire, the internals on fire, the kitchen on fire, everything fucking burnt completely out. Someone, I don't know, threw a handful of bottles of petrol in there.
Yeah. By the way, this coming from the guy who also said that he was a target of an arson attack because the gym that he used to run, that, by the way, trained IDF soldiers, he ended up selling it and it went up in flames later on. And he was like, this was an attack on me, even though I don't own the property anymore. So who the fuck is he to talk? Okay, so moving on to Penny Wong. She is being condemned by Colin Rubenstein. He is from the Australian Israel and Jewish Affairs Council, AJAC. And this is over her failure to unequivocally welcome last week's rescue of the 4 Israeli hostages. Notice also this, always this criticism is you fail to unequivocally welcome or unequivocally condemn this act. In other words, yeah, you support our side, but you're not doing it strongly enough. You're not showing all the emotion and giving all the right words that we demand you make. And because of that, you deserve condemnation.
Swear fealty to me, as a nice Southern man once said.
Right. So, look, this, by the way, was, what the government in Palestine, which, yes, is Hamas, said actually resulted in the deaths of 274 civilians to rescue 4 people in the end. Well, here's what Penny Wong said. She said, "We mourn every life that is lost in this conflict. We mourn every Israeli life and every Palestinian life, and this conflict has been horrific, and the loss of life, what occurred on October 7, what has occurred since, the loss of life, that people are starving, the civilian casualties, all of this is horrific." So that was the line that Colin Rubinstein didn't like. Basically, the fact that she mentioned both sides, how there are casualties and deaths on both sides, and that's bad.
Rubinstein's like strictly
what he was saying was you should have only mentioned Israeli lives and how they're important.
Well, for starters, you gotta love how fucking psychotic this is. Like, have you seen fucking slow-mo more insane in your entire life than you have over the past, like, what, coming up to half a year?
No.
Actually, past half a year at this point. Jesus. Time flies. Time flies when Shlomo's fucking kvetching. No, but I was gonna say Colin Rubinstein is like strictly in a hostage rescuing situation. I bombed 280 something odd civilians. I wouldn't like what I did. I wouldn't be proud of my actions, but I'll be proud that I defended myself.
Yeah. Oh man, he's like if you dare, like just Google an image of Colin Rubinstein. He is such like an ugly goblin-looking Jew as well.
Does he genetically look like he charges interest?
He absolutely does. Yep. Okay. So talking about the areas in Melbourne where you have concentrated Jewish populations. So that includes the inner Melbourne seat of McNamara. There is concerns here that sections of the electorate are taking a hardline position for Palestine, and they tend to come from the Greens. Now, what is it? Sorry, I'm just reading my prep here. So, Labor is saying that the Greens brand is on fire in parts of the seat of McNamara, which was recently redistributed to include the main Jewish suburbs in Victoria that include Caulfield and, Elstonwick, I believe. So in 2021, 1 in every 10 people in McNamara listed Judaism as their religion. However, that does not include the large amount of secular Jews, and you could quite possibly say that the majority of them are secular. So, in other words, you've got a shitload of Jews in.
You got Orthodox, and you've got the slightly left-leaning cousins. Right.
Now, McNamara also is near. I believe this. I hope this is correct. I'm sorry, I don't know the Victorian seats all that well. The inner city seat of Richmond, which is held by the Greens. This was one that they picked up, a lower house seat, of course, in the last election. And that is held by a very pro-Palestinian MP. So basically what they're saying, McNamara, I think, is held by Labor. I'm sorry, let me just really quickly Google that.
We just need to double check that.
Yeah, but look, basically what they're saying is these inner city seats in Melbourne, even if they're not held by the Greens, there is a significant green voting population that kind of live among them, and that's not surprising whatsoever. We're talking about inner city seats that have increasingly been drifting from being, just blue ribbon pro-liberal seats, and as time goes on and they become increasingly urbanized, they drift towards, say, parties like the Teals, or they drift towards parties like the Greens. And that's why, the seat of Melbourne, the seat of Richmond, the seat of, was it Griffith, I think, in Queensland as well? I know a couple of Queensland inner city Brisbane seats drifted to the Greens too. And, Macnamara is held by Labor, by the way.
I think that Vaseline with the rainbow logo on it was made exclusively for people who live in the centre of Melbourne.
Man, I can't believe this. Macnamara, of course, is Josh Burns' seat.
How could what the fuck?
Right.
Jesus Christ.
So you can see how this tension exists here. You've got, very much you have both sides. So this is part of, the Jewish community becoming increasingly nervous in Australia because they're basically surrounded by people who are pro-Palestinian. But come on, tell me this. Are those Greens members, and I hate to defend the Greens or their supporters, but are they really the types to make those Jewish dwellers in Macnamara and Richmond, etc., unsafe? Are they actually a threat, like a security threat to their safety? No, of course not. They would be a security threat to the likes of us, to white nationalists, because they love getting violent with us when we have a rally or something. But the idea that they're going to come out and attack members of the Jewish community for being Jewish is absolutely absurd. But still, I guess that is just sort of symptomatic of Jewish paranoia.
The current ones that are attacking Israel right now, at least the ones doing a genuine effort, are the self-starting ones. It's actually far and few between. It's mostly just Arabs. As soon, even if there was a hint, a whiff that anarchists, left-leaning, activists, left-leaning street activists at least, were even considering that, they would be swept up faster than you can say bash the fash.
Yeah. The one time the state would actually genuinely crack down on violent leftists, street leftists, like Antifa or whatever, is if they were to actually go and target the Jewish community. They would never do that. But say if they actually did, holy shit, the state would crack down on them. And, as like a street force, as a physical force and presence in Australia, they would effectively be reduced to nothing.
And now, am I saying that out of a point of ideology just because I genuinely believe it or it makes me feel good on the inside? No, I'm not saying that. I'm actually saying that because in 2018 I observed it when they went after a synagogue because they were doing some kind of religious practice that they didn't really like, and it could be construed as anti-gay or some shit like that. And they went after and they picketed the synagogue, and then they all got wrapped up on hedges. I'm pretty sure they basically only got it in 2021.
Yeah. And by the way, I think one of the reasons also why they don't often target synagogues, but besides the obvious that, they just don't want to, go after Jews in any way, is also because a lot of synagogues are just pro-homosexual. Like Reform Judaism, for example, is basically supports gay marriage and everything. They have no problem with that. So, yeah. And of course, I'm sure I don't need to go into the Jewish history of the LGBT movement either. Okay, now let's give a story that also shows where we need to draw the line in terms of, let's say, alliances of convenience. But this story also kind of demonstrates how those taking a pro-Palestinian and an anti-Zionist position are not by any means therefore taking a counter-Jewish or counter-Semitic position. And that is there was vandalism recently at the Australian War Memorial by pro-Palestinian activists. So they went to the War Memorial and spray painted a number of pro-Palestinian slogans over the monuments there that has been captured on CCTV. I think they conceal their identity, however. So
how to get the general public to fucking hate you in one simple step.
Yeah, and I mean, this also shows how when it comes to street activism and, you know, like publicity stunts, if you want to call it that, like the left have always been terrible, this kind of thing. I mean, like street protests, like when they used to protest against the G8 and globalization and that kind of thing. I mean, what will they do? They just tear the fucking streets apart, trash everything, go looting and all of this. And now when they're trying to bring a pro-Palestinian message, they go and fucking just do these mindless acts of vandalism on the War Memorial and whatever else. Again, showing that, like, you know, this has no connection to white nationalism, because why the fuck would we go out and vandalize the Australian War Memorial? You know?
I don't think we'd probably vandalize anything, to be honest, unless there was like something completely and utterly fucking heinous. But like, no, I don't. They're not, probably not even then. We're not very criminal people. You know what? We're not criminal people at all.
We turn up in protests that some people might find provocative, but we never engage in violence or property damage. We just don't do
Dude,
that.
we could fucking, you know, flex a muscle right here in like a protest in front of the general public, and they'll say that we killed someone.
Yeah, well, actually, it was funny. Did you see that there was this short protest by the EAM in Sydney? They were basically showing like what was sexualized films to children at some movie theater or something. I might be getting the details a little wrong, but anyway, they turned up with their banner, you know, the one that says "Destroy Pedo Freaks," and the police turned up and they said, "You've got to move on." I think she gave 3 reasons, right? One, it was an unauthorized protest. 2, you're wearing masks, you're concealing your identities. And then 3, you're carrying a weapon. And the weapon was the banner, right? Simply the banner that they were holding. The police, yeah, well, that was their reaction as well. They all just burst out laughing at her. You're like, what?
Well, yeah, that's what they do. That's like fucking sound. It works. It makes the fucking one. Did you see that fucking police officer that was shaking like a fucking leaf during the Australia Day things as he was reading the thing? Where he was like, punishable by up to 5 years in prison. And they all started laughing at him. And the fucking police officer just looked so sullen. Like, I fucking hate that I was put in a position where I had to get laughed at by a fucking, like a busload of fucking dudes.
Yeah, well, in this footage that I saw, it was a woman who read it out. And when she read the thing about a weapon, you could clearly see that she knew that was bullshit. You know, she had a look in her face and just said, like, yeah, you know, no one's going to take this seriously. I'm just saying it as a way of getting rid of them, whatever. So, all right. So, Hizbut Tahrir, remember that group? So, Jewish leaders in Australia are now calling on the federal government to officially designate them a terrorist and extremist organization. Now, look, I'll be honest, Hizbut Tahrir are, you know, not exactly an organization that I agree with. As far as I know, they not only support the restoration of the caliphate, but they want a global caliphate. You know, they're the types who say that Allah owns the whole world. So we need an Islamic world. But look, the reason why they're doing it is because the elements of Hizbut Tahrir in Australia are, I guess you could say, capitalizing on the increased anti-Zionist feeling that we have in Australia, and that some of what they're saying is resonating with Australian Muslims as well. So it's another thing that is making them shake, I guess. Okay.
I don't know. I just like fucking I like this kind of stuff. What's funny to me is torturing people, and this is just right up my alley.
Well, I mean, only in a psychological sense.
Oh yes.
It's making.
I like Sam Hyde's humor because he goes like the most liberal part of like some city and etc. and says like, "Oh, you guys have the best taste in music. You guys know the best bands. What's your taste in music?" And then like some hipster says like the most retard band. He's like, "Wow, that sounds fucking amazing."
I'll never quite get Sam Hyde. I just don't get it, man. That's why I don't find him funny.
Because you're a little fuddy-duddy.
Perhaps. Okay, so last story on Israel and Gaza. There's been a little bit of debate, particularly in the Senate, so the federal parliament, but particularly in the Senate, about the idea of, is Australia or the Australian government in any way contributing to the arms trade in Israel. So the government has said that when it comes to the selling of arms to Israel, that the government of Australia has not sold any arms to Israel in over 5 years. So yeah, officially, that's what it is. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't Australian companies that sell, not necessarily arms, but just goods to
a Lord of War situation where he says like he basically says like, oh, like it's like the biggest arms dealer. He's in the room with the fucking like the Interpol agent. He's like, well, the biggest arms dealer in the world is actually the United States government. The United States government pushes more arms in a day than I do in years. Blah blah blah. And sometimes, and he's like, you're right. I am on a first name basis with every despot and terrible person on this planet. But some of those people is like are like basically like being used by the US. When Uncle Sam doesn't want his fingerprints on the weapons, I step in for that. Yeah, it's every single private arms sailor. It's literally just doing it on behalf of the state. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to do it as a private arms sailor.
Yes, and it doesn't have to necessarily be weapons like guns, rockets, etc. It can simply just be other goods that the Israeli army needs to provide its soldiers, etc. And that's what happens in Australia. We know, I'm sorry I forget the name of the company, but there was one company in particular that has been targeted by Palestinian activists, and they've been doing things like trying to disrupt their shipments out on the docks with jet skis, that kind of thing. But not only that,
I think the only left-wing activist I'll get along with is like a 70s era like eco activist, just because of the tactics and etc. Very like kind of gay, but very respectful. I can respect that.
Yeah, I mean, if the tactics are what we would call civil disobedience and not outright violence and vandalism,
stopping logistics, just body blocking logistics. All right, that actually has a like measurable level of economic damage and requires some fucking balls to do, because by the way, the Pinkertons still the Pinkertons still exist to this day and age. But Scott Bowles does actual damage without really breaking the fucking law. Yeah, there we go. Perfect.
Now, in terms though, like, is specifically the Australian government still involved in any way? Well, yes. So while it is true that we haven't sold any weapons to them in 5 years, documents that were recently revealed in the Senate reveal that Australia has continued to import Israeli-made lethal technology and has made purchases worth millions of dollars from Israeli-owned defense companies, Elbit and Rafael, since October 7. We've detailed some of these before. It tends to be military technology, software, etc., that we have used. The ADF the Australian Defence Force has bought from the Israeli army. So
who did the Israeli army steal it from?
Well, yeah, that's another question. But yeah, I mean, but look, that simply means that in terms of the arms trade between our two countries, it just runs on a one-way street. Okay, we don't supply them with weapons anymore, but we buy from them, and therefore we do help prop up the Israeli government and the Israeli military in a big way. Okay, and we will continue to do so as well. And this was the Greens, by the way, I should point out, that were, I think, particularly David Shoebridge in the Senate, who were pointing this stuff out. And
David Shoe up my ass.
I utterly despise David Shoebridge. I'll never forgive him the fact that one of his staffers, the Asian one, was two girls who faced the Captain Cook statue. One of them was his staffer, and he refused to sack or even discipline her. So he should never be forgiven for that. Okay. On to immigration. So, we'll start off with a sob story. So, Andrew Giles, the immigration minister, is seeking a briefing on visa options for an international student, Devarashi Dika, who is apparently known as Dev.
Brigitte down. Someone get us 50 cc's of turmeric and street oil.
So he was attacked in Hobart on the waterfront. I read this whole article. There was no details here on what the attack was, like what it was.
I'm just going to let you know. Okay, so in comparison, the average grip strength of the Indian male, what other group does it actually equal out to?
I have no idea.
Polish women.
Okay.
Exactly the same. Average Indian male, Polish woman, same grip strength. What does that fucking tell you?
So in other words, if they get into a fight, they're screwed.
Yeah. I remember there was this list of posts of like women complaining about like Indians and not being able to use the 10-pound dumbbell at their gyms. Someone like cross-referenced like literally like hundreds of thousands of posts of women just saying Indian and 10-pound dumbbell gym. And it's literally just be like, and the Indian guy just took the last 10-pound dumbbell. A whole bunch of Indian dudes. I don't know. I'll go to a gym with a whole bunch of Indian dudes, and I can never get the 10-pound dumbbell. It's fucking hilarious.
All right. Well, look. As to whether or not this guy started a fight and couldn't finish it, I don't know. All the ABC said in this article is that he was attacked on the Hobart waterfront in November. And, the attack was so horrific that it actually left him as a paraplegic in a wheelchair. And
he's slowly losing his vision? Yeah.
Yeah, in his left eye. They're saying now that he's all out of visa options, meaning that he's got to go to India. He's going to go back to India soon. Now, of course, this is a natural path for a lot of people. This guy, simply didn't apply for a new visa or, take the appropriate pathways that he could have in order to stay in Australia. And holy shit, we know you can do that. Otherwise, there wouldn't be so many Pajeets staying here. So why is the ABC writing a sob story on him? Well, because if he goes back to India, the Indian healthcare system is so ill-equipped that they simply would not be able to give him the kind of medical and disability support that he needs as a paraplegic. So they're basically just saying, okay, even though this guy has no right to be in the country, we've got to let him stay because his host country is a shithole.
I didn't know this country had a break it and you buy it fucking plan.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, fuck him. Go live in your Elysium fucking tier healthcare system country. I don't want to see you. Every time I see an Indian, it ruins my fucking day.
Yeah. Now, look, let me make a prediction here. This guy will end up staying. Yeah, he'll end up getting a permanent residency. I mean, because we've gone through a few of these sub stories from the ABC. Once there is media attention, you tend
it's
to
game
get
over, man. It's game over.
Yes. And the very fact that Giles said that he is seeking a briefing on this means he's like, okay, I'm going to let him stay, but I'm just getting the advice to know what visa exactly to give him. That's it. So, look out for an announcement on this probably very soon. This Pachita's going nowhere.
Yeah, I know.
All right, so an Iranian man who was in immigration detention in WA. This is a guy who got into a knife fight with another immigration detainee. He actually stabbed this guy to death. So Mohammed Al-Lami, the Iranian, he stabbed to death 32-year-old Turkish man. I don't have his name here. So this was at a detention centre east of Perth in 2022. Now, this apparently caused like a mini riot at the centre.
We did cover this.
This guy was taken from immigration detention into jail in Perth, as he would. Still there now, I believe. And, he had been charged with murder. The trial was about to start. And, well, guess what? The only key witness who was going to testify is dead. So now the DPP have dropped the murder charges against him. And it looks like he's simply just going to go back to immigration detention and just kind of sit it out and go through the normal processes that any other detainee does. Now, I don't know if there was underhanded tactics at play here. Was this witness knocked off or anything? I don't know. Nothing in what I read on this story anyway had any information on that. But yeah, it's interesting the types of people that we have sitting in immigration detention. They do things like get into violent knife fights that result in deaths. Sometimes they also do stuff like inject vegetable oil into their dicks in an attempt at penis enlargements.
So what you're telling me is that, like, inside of these detention centers, the slow blade pierces the shield.
You could perhaps say that.
In Australian immigration detention, the slow syringe pierces the nutsack.
Well, to be fair, he did that in offshore detention. But he made it to Australia under Medivac. He was one of the guys who came to Australia to seek medical assistance because of his boss.
He injected cooking oil into his dick.
Yes.
Sometimes I wake up crying, but sometimes I wake up smiling, knowing that I exist in an absurdist hellhole.
Okay, now I wanted to just go through a quick research paper that was recently released. So this was by a professor of demography at the ANU. This was just, this gave me the shits. Well, I'll just read part of what he said here. He said, both major political parties are targeting arrivals of international students because this is the fastest way to ensure that net overseas migration will fall to a much lower level, which is an imperative for the government in an election year. So what he's talking about is the Labor government's current attempt to reduce, or apparently to try to reduce, net immigration. For the main reason, I guess, that people are linking it to the housing crisis and the cost of living crisis. Now, it is true.
Oh, what? Like, it's hyper fucking popular to stop the fucking deluge of human shit flooding this country?
What is so misleading about what this guy is saying is that he's essentially blaming, like, the big uptick in immigration in the past, 2 years or so. Basically, once we got out of COVID restrictions. He's trying to basically say that's all because of international students, right? because, of course, international student arrivals dried up during COVID, as they did for any other type of visa. And then in the post-COVID world, there was an overcorrection. We had to get immigration back to pre-COVID levels, so we let students flood in again. Now, that's not true. For one thing, universities or the big education lobby are still complaining that international students' arrivals are still below pre-COVID levels. So that's just not true. Second of all, you're talking about much more than a simple overcorrection. We went through last week that the calendar year for 2023, net migration was over 600,000 people. That's basically official now. We kept getting told it was only 500,000, but no, it was over 600,000. So no, it is not just international students. Now, where he is correct is that, that's the area that they're tinkering with. Labor has actually reduced the rate of student applications being approved by 24%. And also the coalition supports that, and they support the associated newer policies like stopping visa hopping, but also doing things like, they want to deport the students who are pro-Palestine activists, for example.
Yeah, the license to shit up the demographics of this country is actually, one of the things in the clause is that you have to be pro-Israeli and pro-Jewish. You have to love Jews. I love Jewish people. I love them.
Right. But this guy is basically saying, okay, they're going for a short-term attack on net migration. He's right about that. But he's saying it's just all to do with international students. Well, look, I'm sorry, if that were true, remember for 2024, the months of January and February had more net migration than any other January or February in Australia's history. And that was after student visa applications began to slow. So if we were actually cutting the amount of international students that were coming into Australia in January and February, why did we have record net migration in January and February? It's a load of fucking shit.
No, it is.
So this guy is actually basically just saying,
don't expect any institution that would talk to you about the stuff that isn't flying like a particularly risque symbol to tell you the truth on this, because they won't. They know you'll hate the fucking truth.
I know,
and they know, getting a little bit too animated about this shit.
No, I mean, this story really triggered me as well, which is why I'm going through it. But it just shows the desperation that, left-wing academics have, and how they try to just put out these complete false narratives about what the political debate is about. And they refer to it as a political football, and they're just using it as an excuse to beat up on migrants before an election. That is just utter crap. It's not true at all. And they'll also want to say that it's the rich ruling class that are beating up on the migrants as well.
Dude,
no,
if one
they
of us
support them coming in.
Now, granted, these motherfuckers have ground penetrating sonar, so there's no level of underground you could get with these people where you could pull this off. But if one of us was to fly under the radar, put down the policies that we actually fucking believe and support and etc., we'll be fucking king of this country by the end of the next election season.
Yeah. I mean, if I could say two things that would guarantee Peter Dutton to be the next Prime Minister, it would be to actually have a hard line on net migration, not on permanent residencies or anything like that, but actually net migration. And two, to scrap net zero by 2050. If he did those two things, I guarantee Peter Dutton would be the next Prime Minister and turf Labor out after only one term. But he won't do it because the Liberal Party is bought and sold, just like the Labor Party is. Okay, now just on the High Court decision that we're all very familiar with to outlaw indefinite detention in Australia, we now know that those who have had to have been let out of immigration detention as a result of that ruling is now 160. Remember when we first started talking about this, it was like 70 or something. It was a very small number. But the guy who is another one of these people who has been released is a convicted Polish drug smuggler who says that he can't go back to Poland because of the threat of organized crime figures that he used to be associated with, or he's in competition with, I guess, in Poland. And he was another guy that very, very quietly was given a temporary visa and was let go, and is now, just simply a part of the Australian community now.
I don't know, buddy. Fucking open up God, what is it called again? It's like Polish rip-off dumplings. I'm going to piss off a lot of people by saying it. Pierogi, I don't know. Open up a pierogi shop or some shit. Like, fuck. I'm not exactly interested in keeping your ass around, but I guess I have no say in the matter.
Well, look, I should say, disclaimer, I have no problems with Poles being here. I have no problem with Polish migration.
Some of my best friends are Poles.
Okay. Let's move on to
the Polish dudes back in the day were the best.
We are, of course, going to talk about nuclear power. So we do now have a bit of policy detail on the coalition's official support of building nuclear reactors in Australia. They want, I believe, 7 either small or large-scale nuclear reactors, and they've actually announced the sites, all of which I believe would be in the location of a former coal-fired gas plant. So, that's in an attempt to save money, basically. It is cheaper to kind of to build where they used to be. So the plan is to build them in Qiang in Queensland, Clyde in Queensland, Liddell in New South Wales in the Hunter Valley, Mount Piper in New South Wales near Lithgow, Port Augusta in South Australia, Loy Yang in Victoria, what a Victorian name, which is in the Latrobe Valley, and Menorah in WA, which is near Collie. No surprise that they're going for a place near Collie, considering that's where we are utterly, utterly gutting our coal industry. So, let's just go through a little bit of the
Collie is one of the better ones out there, because like a lot of the quote unquote coal and etc. and power infrastructure is based out of Collie. Then a lot of technicians that work on turbines, which is like a good 80% of the fucking mass of a nuclear power plant. Yeah, they're in Collie. That makes sense. A lot of the other places are actually other power generation sites, coal, hydro, or at least dealing with hydro or whatever. It just makes sense.
So you would be able to use a lot of the existing infrastructure to cost save,
That's probably why they're doing it. They put it out in the middle of buttfuck nowhere because no one wants to live around a coal-fired power plant. And a lot of transmission infrastructure exists between there and metropolitan and urban areas.
Yeah. Okay, so
simple stuff.
Here are the other details of the plan. So the coalition have pledged to build 2 small modular reactors by 2035, or 2 larger scale reactors by 2037. And that depends on which is found to be the most viable. So, of course, we don't have all the details yet. A lot of the stuff is still preliminary. So that would mean that we would get those 7 nuclear reactors operating by 2050. So this is obviously a long-scale plan.
I think they need to renegotiate with their contractors about that. I mean, like, I would love to actually get an interview with some kind of nuclear expert. Maybe that's like a stretch goal for me, but and also maybe a nuclear historian. But I think that's a bit. I think that's under delivering.
I think they'd be quite reluctant to come on our show as well to do that. So now, look, here's actually another reason why.
Let me reach into my back pocket. I'll pull one out.
Here's another reason why they need to scrap net zero by 2050. I just mentioned there that the plan is to have all 7 nuclear plants operating by 2050. Okay, how could you then say that nuclear is part of the plan to reduce emissions to net zero by 2050 if they're not going to be operational until 2050? You know what I mean? So you can't. It's very hard, obviously, to sell nuclear to the public in terms of reaching these emissions reductions targets. You just need to basically say, no, this isn't about reducing emissions. This is about cheaper, more affordable, more reliable, and yes, safer sources of power. That's what it's about. And, there was actually a poll published in, of all places, The Guardian the other day that actually showed that support for nuclear power from their own polling has gone from 39% to 52%. Okay, now that may not be an overwhelming majority, but remember, that's polling from The Guardian, okay? Other polling has support for nuclear as much as like 2/3. So, dare I say that those people showing support for nuclear are not really motivated by climate change and wanting to fight its effects and everything.
No, it's entirely ideological. It's again taking these people at face value, right?
Yeah.
Never fucking do it. I remember reading this one article, literally like posting about why nuclear isn't a viable option as like a zero emissions option. Not that I particularly care about fucking emissions, but it basically said like, well, it doesn't actually, and this was actually rather earnest. I was surprised about this. He's like, well, it doesn't disrupt current structures of power. Power, he's meaning social power in this instance. But yeah, no.
Well, maybe not in terms of the plan to get there.
What the fuck?
Well, finish your point, though.
Yeah, no, it's no. I was gonna say like, what the fuck? Like, why the fuck does that matter? I want fucking decent. Everyone around the world wants a fucking cheaper electricity bill where they have fucking reliable electricity in the first place. Granted. But everyone wants a cheaper electricity bill. This is like one fucking universal thing. If you got a fucking Edison fucking Model 1 electric light bulb in your fucking city, you want a cheaper electricity bill. You want cheaper energy. That's it.
Yeah, everyone wants. When polling asks voters, like, what is the number one issue that you think about when you go to the ballot box, cost of living has been number one for years now. And obviously power bills, play a large role in that. But no, in terms of like the power structure, the social structure, there might actually be some headaches in this regard. So first of all, the coalition, the government, in assuming that they were to win the next election, would have to convince the parliament to lift the prohibition on nuclear power. So remember, currently it is Commonwealth policy that we do not have, at least large-scale nuclear reactors in this country. There is a small one in New South Wales that you could barely call a reactor.
It's for testing. It's a research reactor. I mean, technically, like, it's kind of
power that goes to the grid.
Not really, no. I meant they might have like a fucking like a some kind of like, you know how like you set up solar panels and you have like the fucking like the meter that like can actually put you back in the grid. Maybe they do that. I'm not sure, but its primary purpose is research and medical testing.
Okay, so yeah, it's not as simple as just kind of announcing like new spending on infrastructure, and we build the plans. It would actually, we have to have new legislation that would overturn that ban. And remember, we also, like, we're only allowed, I believe it's 3 uranium mines in Australia, and we're not allowed to use any of that uranium. We simply import it to other countries, like India, who have a nuclear stockpile of weapons. Now, the other hurdle, I guess you could say, is that every state premier where there is one of these reactors proposed to be built opposes it. And that's because, well, they're all Labor premiers, aren't they? There are no plans so far to build one in Tasmania, which is, of course, the only state that has a Liberal government. So they have all come out in unison here, the state premiers, that is, of WA, Queensland, etc., and saying that there is no way in hell that they would allow the coalition to build a nuclear reactor at these proposed sites. So Chris Minns and the Victorian Premier Jacinta Allen said that even if Peter Dutton managed to lift the ban on federal nuclear power, he would also have to overcome bans at a state level. And yes, they do exist. Now, complicating that matter further, and this is really disappointing, in Queensland, where they've got 2 reactors proposed, the Liberal National Party, the opposition that is probably going to be the government in a few months' time, they're actually anti-nuclear as well. So, that means that even with the prospects of a coalition, of an LNP government in Queensland, you'd still end up with a government that says, no, we're not lifting the ban. So there are hurdles. There are serious hurdles that have to be jumped here to actually get this going. Now, that said, I was just reading before the show that apparently there's already internal pressure within the Queensland LNP, and certainly for federal LNP members, they are putting pressure on Chris Foley, the opposition leader, to overturn that ban. To go backwards here and say, look, you're hurting the Liberal Party, you're hurting Peter Dutton's chances of becoming Prime Minister, and, well, more importantly, it's just a stupid policy as well to be anti-nuclear.
Also, it's actually becoming much, much less popular. People aren't scared anymore, and also, people are actually more scared of than fucking, some kind of nuclear accident. Some kind of like abstract thing that happened because either retardation, bad design, or straight up corruption. People are scared about opening their fucking energy bill these days.
I saw some cartoon, I can't remember who put this out, but it's obviously a play on the three-eyed fish in The Simpsons, which of course was like a result of Mr. Burns's pollution from his nuclear power plant. They had a three-eyed Blinky Bill, the cartoon koala.
Oh god! Did you see the one where it's like there's like Hobart and there's like a fucking like gigantic radioactive echidna?
Yes, I saw that one as well.
So, my fucking god! You like you know what fucking people care about is it your dumb fucking cartoons you're making? Is it your dumb cartoons, or is it fucking like coming close to a fucking grand for like a month period in energy bills?
Right. And I mean,
which one is it? Come on, fucking tell me, audience. Fucking tell me, Australian public. Which one do you care about more?
with any like kind of in large scale industrial project, there's always going to be environmental impacts. Sometimes they're not always negative, by the way. But, you know, in terms of like people who have died in nuclear meltdowns, I mean, and remember there's really just been one, Chernobyl, you know, you then have to say, contrast that with the amount of people who die mining for coal or something like that, or you know, other industrial accidents that occur in the production of power. By comparison, nuclear is actually very safe. Very safe. And also, it's not like nuclear technology has stood still.
No.
As it has advanced, it has become increasingly safe as well. And, you know, the idea that you would be building something as risky as Chernobyl is, you know, just ridiculous.
Well, again, we got fucking dampening materials. Like, it's literally like you'd have to go out of your way to cause a meltdown at a modern-day nuclear reactor because of the dampening materials inside the fuel rods. They have a maximum throttle. You can literally, like, dial them up so they have a maximum built in materially to them.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about the cost here. So the coalition has said that they will release costings before the next election. There were, I think they actually hinted before that they just weren't going to do that. You know, in the same way as like there's not a 2030 emissions target right now. And they say we don't necessarily have to release those costings. So Angus Taylor, the shadow treasurer, said something somewhat contradictory to Peter Dutton, and that is that he said that nuclear power is completely commercially viable, meaning that it could entirely rely on foreign investments. Like the government might, you know, get the ball rolling with the construction of the plants, but, you know, then that would be it. Peter Dutton recently, when he was pressured over, you know, the idea of taxpayer money going towards these projects, said, well, look, basically every other form of power generation in Australia is subsidised in some way. I believe the only exception is coal, which of course actually has government policies running counter to its production. Even gas gets subsidies, believe it or not. The only reason it does is because we're destroying coal, and we need to at least somewhat prop up the gas industry here to, you know.
Well, again, it was the increasing subsidies for gas was because we're going to lose the Ragnarok.
Yeah. Apparently, also there are new gas shortages in Australia. Something I'm sorry, I did not have time to put into the prep today, but I was reading it earlier. Especially now, of course, we're getting into the colder part of winter and more people are turning the heating up. There are concerns about Australian gas reserves not being able to keep up. But anyway, on the topic of subsidies and nuclear, when Dutton said that, like, look, you know, if all of these other forms of power receive subsidies, then, you know, why can't nuclear? Chris Bowen pounced on that, and of course, so did the whole anti-nuclear media. And I can't believe this, but they're running the line of saying, you, the taxpayer, are going to have to pay for this. It's like, huh? Like, what are you talking about? The entire green energy industry would not exist if it wasn't for taxpayers footing the bill. Now, another news item of this week was that there was some report that came out from Australia's biggest investors in power generation in Australia. One of them was Andrew Forrest, the owner of FMG, Fortescue Metals. And he basically said that there is no money to be made in nuclear power. Therefore, it would not attract large-scale investment. Now, why is that?
What the
No.
Look,
But so he somewhat has a point in the fact that he's making a shitload of money off green energy.
I had the opportunity to. Well, I've actually met him in person about 3 times at this point. Oh God. Oh. Oh man. If only I knew.
Okay, well look, the reason why guys like him, wealthy industrialists like him, is because they have been investing in green energy for years now, because they saw the writing on the wall in terms of that's just the general direction that governments are pushing us towards. And that if you do get in, particularly if you get in early, you can take advantage of lucrative government contracts, subsidies, tax breaks, etc.
And get your money for nothing.
Yeah. So far, that doesn't exist for nuclear. Of course it doesn't. When you've got Angus Taylor saying, well, no, it's just a commercially viable industry, it can survive by itself. These companies are looking at nuclear and saying, okay, where are the government contracts? Where are the tax breaks? Where are the subsidies? They're not there. Of course, they're then going to come out and say, all right, well, it's not worth investing in because we can't squeeze the money out of the government and we would simply have to rely on profit making alone. That's it. So that's not a surprise that it's out there. Now, that said, if that means that green energy has such a competitive advantage because of all of that government favoritism, then why the hell would it not be okay to restore the balance in some sense by subsidizing nuclear power? I would not have any problem with that. And I wouldn't support it for the long term. I would simply support it as a short-term measure to restore the balance. And then once that has been established, the government could, quite quickly withdraw its support from nuclear and let it just survive by itself. That's my take anyway. What do you think, Nolsey?
Yeah, no, nuclear has worked privately before. I mean, there's models in the States, a handful of models obviously in India as well. Yeah, I mean, a good section of France's ones were too. Although I will make the concession that a pilot program was normally made by the state to start off with. But then again, we're talking about projects that started in at latest the mid-70s.
Yeah, I know that. I mean, it's just sort of like in the nature of French politics to, have public infrastructure. But I mean, that has still resulted in a power grid so reliable in France that they actually provide a significant amount to Germany. And with Germany is, supposed to be the industrial kings of Europe, yet they can't produce enough energy themselves because of their own green energy nightmare.
Oh, don't you know that on a sunny and windy day in Germany, they produce more power than the country needs?
Is that right?
Oh, no. No, it's not. It was a fucking lie made up in the fucking early aughts.
Right, it's a lot of crap.
It's they produce, okay, total power users, yes, they do. Can they sell it? No. Can they use it? No. Is it anywhere convenient for the population centers of Germany? No. Well, if an angry pixie is produced in a valley in the middle of buttfuck nowhere, Freiburg, or wherever the fuck, did it really exist in the first place?
Right. Now, look, just last thing I'll say on this debate on nuclear is that this has been causing a lot of commentators to say that this is now gearing up to be a climate wars election, like it's a referendum on climate change. Now, people have said that before. Well, people have said that as far back as 2007 with Rudd versus Howard. The only thing I don't like about this is that it does somewhat take the focus off immigration. And I'm not saying that the coalition really offer anything better than Labor, maybe something very marginally better. But I simply just don't like the idea of us not talking about it anymore. Even if the coalition doesn't have any concrete policies, it's good for them to at least keep the debate alive. So, I hope that this doesn't sort of get so heated that we just lose track of immigration, even though it's an important issue, of course. Immigration always reigns supreme as what we should be focusing on the most. Okay. So just a quick story on the proposed live export ban. So this is on, live cattle meat exports to other countries.
Yes, the sheep protests.
Yeah, mainly on sheep. So yeah, that protest did go ahead in Perth like 2 weeks ago or so.
I'm so fucking happy I avoided that, and I've seen the rest of it. Protest down south.
It wasn't very disruptive though. I don't know what you saw of it, but I was in the city at the time. I mean, first of all, it did not cause disruptions to the commute to work, because I don't think they actually really started till 10 o'clock or so. So
I was out in the gates about 2 days later, and the lady I was seeing was complaining about it because apparently, she works in the city, so she got caught up in it.
Okay, well, if you start work a bit later or something, okay, maybe you did. But they were there and they were beeping their horns and all that kind of thing. You could say it's one of the more polite protests because the disruptions were minimal. It was there nonetheless, and that is a big part of the agricultural industry here in WA and across Australia, of course. So they're angry about it. But look, the official government policy is to completely phase it out by 2028, so not all that long away. They're doing a nationwide committee hearing at the moment, and it has just made its way to WA. That's why we recently had that protest. So that's basically just, at least what they'd say, it's like a talking tour where they're listening to farmers and those most affected by it, which is a lot of angry people. And they reckon that there's going to be about 2,000 people in attendance. Although, I'm sorry, that might have actually already occurred. I got this story a few days ago. But it looks like it's pretty futile because the government is not backing away from the ban. That's still going to be there. These talks are merely on how they're going to make the transition. And I guess that means payouts. How are they going to support those people who would just go broke as a result of this? And
I don't think they will, dude. Farmers are one of the kind of basically a farmer's a large chunk of capital, right? They're the only class of people who can hold a large chunk of capital and then just be completely and utterly fucked over. Possibly the last class of person in this day and age that you can do that to. They will basically just be forced to sell at a fucking horrendously low price to some kind of processing or ag multi-corp at a horrendously low price.
Yeah, I mean, it could well end up like that. Well, look, I don't know if this speaking to or whatever, listening to, you could call it, is maybe just addressing.
I was going to say, I've talked about this in the past. I do have insider baseball on livestock, the livestock scene in Australia, and yeah, that's pretty much what everyone's thinking is going to happen.
That it's just going to die and they won't be compensated.
Yeah. As a failed farmer, you're not compensated, and if you fail, it's not normally about you. It's normally about government policies. Farming is, as old as about 10,000 years. Government policies, on the other hand, well, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't have any doubt that they will end it by 2028.
Just,
you've got a point.
Just a quick reminder: the last names of lords and ladies are normally the areas which their great ancestors used to farm.
Right. Well, look, I don't know. I wouldn't completely rule out the idea of some compensation packages for them. It might happen. I mean, they have been doing it for people who are affected by the closure of coal, for example. The Greens hate that, by the way. They hate the idea of compensating coal companies, but it still does happen.
Well, I was going to say, I think with companies, they have enough liquid capital at this given moment to actually do something about it. Maybe knock over a politician or bribe a politician to do it. Farmers' capital is always tied up in either soil, crop, or pounds of flesh. They do not have the ability to bribe politicians all that much.
No, that's true. Big Agro has that power.
Yes,
and
they do.
Use it.
That's what I was saying. The farmer, even if it's an agri corporation or a livestock corporation or something like that, they can get minced by bigger fish.
Well, they effectively control the National Party now. That is what the National Party is there for, to serve the big interests of big agro.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's move on to the economy and the cost of living. So, interesting report that was released. Actually, this was basically just data that was released by the Australian Tax Office. And it's concerning millionaires in Australia and how they dodge paying tax. So, according to them, more than 100 Australians earn more than $1 million in total income, yet paid no tax whatsoever. This was for the financial year of 2021 to 22. So, okay, how does this work exactly? How do you earn that much and pay no tax? So, they said overall, these 102 millionaires claimed $279 million worth of different deductions to reduce their tax bills to zero. The vast bulk of this was $240 million in donations to tax-deductible charities, or an average about $2.4 million a week going to them. I'd also like to know, would they have any personal connections to those charities? And therefore, they just sort of recycling the money in a way, and that money comes back to them in some way.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm not even joking. One of the big things, and people that I talk to at events, black suit events that I get invited to from time to time, is for tax purposes.
Yeah, of course. Now, well, also, simply using a tax agent to manage your taxes, that is an allowable deduction as well. So you can claim that. So yeah, there's all sorts of clever things you can use to claim deductions and pay less and less tax. The average person never does that, they're lucky if they can claim work from home expenses like the internet or printing paper or something.
Yeah, they're lucky if they get a couple grand back on their tax return.
Right. It's very small.
Yeah, literally, they're lucky if they get $4 grand back, and it's oh yes, I can go and buy that set of furniture that I may or may not have wanted. That's going to depreciate immensely as soon as I take it out of the store. Or maybe I can go and pay off this set of bills that I've been or my debt to a degree. Yeah. I'm not even joking. The barrier to entry is just a high-end accountant, which costs, an absolute shit ton of money. But then you get absolute.
It doesn't matter because then you get that money back anyway. You just claim it as a deduction. So you get it back later. But yeah, of course, you have to be able to afford it in the first place, which, only these millionaires can. So, yeah, they're the only ones who get access to them. Yeah, it's quite a system. Okay, so the Deputy Nationals leader, Perrin Davey, she's got a pretty low profile, but she has contributed her own thought bubble, as she put it, into the cost of living debate. And this was very interesting. She said that, not every woman wants to go back to work after having a child. And what she proposed here was...
good.
Yeah, well, what she proposed was when, these women take out their maternity leave and whatever, but then after that it's time to, the maternity leave to end and go back to work. Instead, what could happen is that a generous tax break is given to the husband instead. So, the prime breadwinner of the family. And that is done as an incentive for the mother to stay at home, not work, and simply look after the child and be a homekeeper, or however you word it. So I thought, that doesn't sound like a bad idea at all. What I found interesting, though, was I mentioned she described this as a thought bubble. This is not coalition or even National Party policy. She simply went out and floated the idea, which is a very rare and you could also argue silly thing to do, because then, of course, you risk openly going against your own party's positions and policies. So I'm not really too sure why she did it. But, I thought that was very interesting. And, these are the kind of policies that they have in countries like Russia, where, you're rewarded for having more children.
Or Hungary as well, yeah.
Yeah. And not only that, but mothers are then encouraged to stay at home and continue to look after and raise those children. Okay, now last story on cost of living was, a little quickie for you. According to Choice, which is a consumer advocacy group, they have deemed that the cheapest place to buy your groceries is Aldi. So
yes.
It's not Woolworths.
7 cents difference between Woolworths and Coles, and $15 at Aldi's. I don't think I actually had a talk with my coworker about this exact statistic today. I was like, I don't think the Australian market was actually ready for Aldi's. And he's like, what do you mean by that? And I was like, I don't think the average Australian was actually prepared to go to a grocery store and come back with a battery-operated drill from a no-name brand.
Maybe not. Yeah, I mean, it is like when you go overseas, you go into those shops in America, Walmart would be a very good example, where they basically just literally sell everything. In Australia, it's very different. You go to Coles or Woolies or whatever just to buy groceries. That's it. Even like Coles or Woolworths liquor, it will be a separate shop. Australian law says you cannot, if you sell alcohol, you have to sell it on its own. You have to just be an alcohol shop.
Yeah, the fucking separate till that they actually registered to a separate ABN.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's just silly because they've got it right next door. But yeah, that's the way it is. In other countries, you just go into a one-stop shop and you can buy your power tools, your alcohol, and your groceries all in the same place. Yeah, we don't have that really in Australia. Okay, let's move on to industrial relations. So it looks like the government is further distancing themselves from the CFMEU. They have been doing that for, you could actually arguably say as far back as the 1980s when Bob Hawke deregistered the BLF, the Builders Labourers Federation, which of course was, basically what the CFMEU was back then. They just reformed and became the CFMEU. So, they've always been that little bit too militant for the Labor Party, and you could perhaps say a little bit of thorn in their side, taking industrial action a step too far. But anyway, new legislation is going to be moved by Tony Burke, the IR minister, to allow the manufacturing division of the CFMEU to split. Now, this was previously done for the mining division of the CFMEU. The coalition passed legislation to allow that to happen. The CFMEU, as it operates, is, you could say quite dictatorial. They basically say they want to have as many members as they want, and therefore they want to represent as many industries as they possibly can. A recent example of them, of that strategy, of course, was where they absorbed the Maritime Union of Australia. We still pretty much always refer to them as the CFMEU, but they're actually the CFMMEU, Construction, Forestry, Mining, Maritime and Energy Union. And of course, the coalition went nuts over that and tried to stop that from happening. Basically, the bigger the union, the more powerful they are. The coalition would prefer, and it looks like the Labor Party even now would prefer, that they be split into smaller groups. So yeah, this would allow the manufacturing division to break away. Worth noting that they're very small. In fact, you notice when I spelt out the acronym before, the word manufacturing doesn't even exist in the title. So they are a small division. There is already the Australian Manufacturers Union. So there's already a union that represents them. So even though the union is opposing this, ultimately, I don't know if it would have that much of an effect on them. If they were just to lose a few members who work in manufacturing, it wouldn't have a massive effect on them. So look, they're still obviously opposing this war on the AFL. So Tony Burke has now come out and accused John Setka, who of course is from the Victorian branch, of bullying, thuggery, and waging a petty personal vendetta against the AFL. And so many people are kind of seeing this new legislation as a way of the Labor Party punishing the CFMEU for these attacks on the AFL. We still don't know what's going to happen yet. We got to wait for the construction of that Hobart Stadium to get underway to see how all that goes. But yeah, something tells me it'll be a bit of a shit show when it does. Okay, now...
Well, let's hope we survive to see it.
Yeah, well, last story on IR. Well, just a quick one. The coalition wants to bring back in full form the Australian Building and Construction Commission, which is basically the industrial watchdog. It officially does not exist anymore, although, remnants of it are still there. The Labor Party did not entirely abolish it. They just sort of shrunk it. But the coalition is saying, shelved it, you could say. The coalition is saying, hey, look, what the CFMEU is doing now, the AFL, would not be happening if you had the ABCC in power, in existence. So yeah, they're reiterating their stance to reintroduce it. And something the coalition always do, I think the only recent example is the last government is... Tony Abbott did. I was going to say what they always do is have a royal commission into the union in some way, or it's a royal commission into the building industry, but that's really just a guise for the unions, for the CFMEU. They always have a royal commission and they try to hurt them in that way. So certainly would not put it past Peter Dutton if he became the next Prime Minister to do that. Okay. So, on to housing. Now, builders. We've talked a lot about how construction companies, including those who build houses in Australia, have simply gone bust. One of the reasons certainly that we only have 0.1% economic growth in the last quarter, despite all of the migrants we're importing. But what has occurred in, well, not just Victoria, that this is where this story comes from, but around the country, is that when these builders collapse, they simply go into liquidation. The construction site is at a standstill until you can get a new builder in to finish the job. But there are government-run insurers that give you a payout in the event that your builder goes bust. Apparently, there is a massive hold-up occurring in Victoria at the moment. So the Victorian Managed Insurance Authority says 1/3 of outstanding claims were lodged more than a year ago. So there is a big backlog of people basically waiting for a compensation payout. And worth pointing out that, these are government-run insurers. So they're taking their time with them. So the opposition in Victoria is they want to force the Ombudsman to investigate the insurers' behaviour and what's causing the hold-up here. And, I did see something on the news the other day of all these people who have, like, a house that is just, like, half-finished. And not only, like,
are they waiting on the foundation.
Yeah, but, like, the one that I saw, I think it was a bloody Indian couple. But what happened with them, it was sort of a double whammy. When they finally did get a new builder to come in and finish the contract, they went and identified all of these defects that the previous builders had made. So I guess, what's happening is because so many of those builders were about to go bust, they were cutting corners everywhere to cut costs. So a lot of the time, not only do you end up with like a half-finished house, but you've got all these fucking defects. Like you've got these extra costs on top of what you were originally paying. And so, you get cost blowouts and you get time blowouts as well in terms of getting the job done. Okay, so still in Victoria, the government has revealed the number of homes it is proposing to see built in each local government area across the state to reach a target of 2 million new dwellings by 2051. I doubt it. I very much doubt it. So this follows the release of a housing statement in September, which aimed to increase housing stock to keep up with demands of population growth, of course, while addressing affordability issues. So Jacinta Allen said, "The data tells us that Melbourne and Victoria's population is going to grow and continue to grow significantly over the decades ahead. We need to take a long-term view for that long-term change that is coming to our city and state." Okay.
Well, you probably should have thought about that before deciding to become the city that we sacrificed to Moloch.
Right. Now, look, obviously immigration is a federal issue, not a state issue. But like in New South Wales, for example, they've been calling on the government to increase the amount of skilled tradesmen, or tradespersons, I should say, of course, that we import into Australia. Because, as Chris Minns said, we need migrants so that we can fix the housing crisis, because we need migrants to build houses. He has said this, I kid you not. Now, similarly, in New South Wales, this was revealed in their state budget that we'll get to soon. They're saying that they could actually build 30,000 new homes over 5 years, despite the fact they have workforce shortages, soaring costs, increasing immigration. So Chris Minns spruiked his $5 billion budget centerpiece of 8,400 new social housing homes and surplus land for another 21,000 homes. He acknowledged potential workforce shortages and said that was an issue for the federal government. So this is what I was just talking about. He's demanding that the federal government actually import more migrants to account for the skill shortage, you know. At the same time, he's saying we don't have enough houses. Why, Chris? Why don't you have enough houses?
Can we square this circle? Can we bring these two lines into the point in which they meet and figure out why the fuck they meet? Oh yeah, infinity fucking Indians and not enough housing. Trust me, as someone who's still trying to buy a fucking house with the money I got from selling my house, yeah, there's infinity fucking Indians in this country. I'm hearing fucking Hindi. I'm hearing Pashto. I'm hearing all kinds of fucking shit at these fucking home opens. And I understand half of it too.
Well, you'd be used to it by now. I guess you would pick up a few words here and there, wouldn't you?
That's the sad part.
Another story I left out in the prep was that Chris Minns is also planning to build high-density housing for emergency services workers. Now, the reason for that is because, and if you're listening from New South Wales, I'm sure you have probably one hell of a commute to work. Everyone I've spoken to has ever worked in Sydney always talks about the nightmare of navigating traffic on the way to work. Well, emergency services workers typically work 12-hour shifts. That's the nature of a job like that. So imagine working those shifts and then stacking on top of it like an hour and a half commute. And this is what a lot of them have been complaining about, is that they are just absolutely fucking beat, not just because of the shift, but because of the endless commute as well. So what Labor is doing now is building apartments that are not quite in a city, but, closer to the CBD. And they're earmarked exclusively for emergency services workers. So they can live there instead, basically. Now, the amount, I believe that number, though, that they're constructing at the moment is 400 apartments. Believe me, there are a lot more than 400 emergency services workers working in Sydney. So they've got a hell of a long way to go. Okay, so on to crime. Just one quick story. We have appointed to the newly created Deputy Commissioner for Young People a man called Rick Curtis, who is a career firefighter. He's said to be a very inspirational leader. I'd never heard of him before, though, who has experience in structural and cultural change. Now, the main thing that this guy is going to be in charge of overseeing is youth detention. So Banksia Hill and, I guess, Unit 18 at Casuarina Prison. This just seemed like an elaborate PR stunt by the Labor government here in WA, I think. They're just always trying to make it look like they're doing everything they can to ease youth crime and, young criminals running amok when they're put in detention. And apparently this inspirational firefighter is part of that solution. Somehow I doubt it.
Okay. Somehow it's maybe like the inbuilt fucking impulse control of the children in the first place. It is the cause of it.
Okay. Now, WA's new gun laws have just passed the Parliament and come into effect in only a couple of weeks, I believe. So that is going to affect, they reckon, around 90,000 West Australians. Apparently, we have 90,000 gun owners here in WA. But these new gun laws are said to be, and this is what the government claims, the toughest gun laws in the country. So, these new laws create 8 new license categories. Each of those categories restricts you to a certain amount of guns and a certain amount of ammunition. The most common cap is 10, so you can only own 10 guns. But for some other categories, it's lower. So that includes individuals. Now, those individuals are basically those who use guns for competition, hunting, that kind of thing. Business, primary producers, and collectors. Collectors, I imagine, surely they would have to have a higher cap. I don't think there's anything in this article about that, but collectors in a lot of cases actually have guns that you can't even use anymore. They're not.
Yeah, because the metallurgy has failed those guns.
Yeah, safe to say.
Y'all ain't fucking firing a 1911, are you?
All right, so what else have we got besides these guns and ammo caps? Well, if you want to renew or to simply get a firearms license, you now have to convince the WA police that you are a fit and proper person. So this is a red tape process, basically, that you must go through. And that does involve a mental health and physical health check. They got to make sure that you are mentally and physically capable of owning a gun. For example, if you have like a criminal record that is of a violent nature, you can't have one. If you have ever had a domestic violence conviction, you cannot have one either. So apparently, if you have a friend that has a farm, the ABC I'm reading from here asked a question, can you still shoot on that farm, like if you don't have a license? And they said maybe. It's not currently clear yet. But apparently the way it can work is that property owners can issue letters that allow people to shoot vermin on their property. So that would mean that the owner of that farm would have to issue you permission formally for you to be allowed to shoot on that farm. So other people who are just outright banned from getting a license include blackies, members of extremist organizations, anyone who has served a restraining order, and as I said before, anyone who... I got it wrong. Not just if you've been convicted of domestic violence, but if you've just been accused of domestic violence.
Yep, there we go. Red flag repackaged for Australia.
I mean, how hard is it to accuse someone of domestic violence?
Opinion, like, can I live with you for a little bit? Also, you beat the fuck out of me. There we go.
All right. Let's now move on to state politics. We will look at the New South Wales budget that was passed a few days ago. As usual, I will use the ABC's winners and losers list to give you a breakdown. So to go through winners, social housing, $6.6 billion that is going to go into social housing. That, of course, will be high density. It is New South Wales, after all. The general housing supply, we already got into that earlier. So promised to deliver 21,000 new homes and releasing surplus land. GPs and patients. So this is increasing the rate of bulk billing for patients. Waiving unpaid payroll tax. I still think they should just waive payroll tax across the board, not just for GPs. But anyway, public transport, more than $22 billion allocated to new infrastructure. The centrepiece is the $2 billion Labor election commitment to the stage 2 of Parramatta Light Rail. Western Sydney Airport. So they get a $1 billion boost for roads linking the site. That includes 4-lane upgrade to Elizabeth Drive, the next stage of construction on Menorah Road, and 4 lanes along part of Mulga Road. School students. So an extra $8.9 billion in funding for building new schools and upgrading existing ones. Okay, where are you going to get the teachers, though? And how are you going to convince the teachers who did recently go on strike, I might add, in New South Wales over paying conditions?
Yeah.
So, yeah, okay, you put all that money into building the schools. What about putting the money into actually paying the teachers too? Okay, another winner, hospital patients. $3.4 billion of spending on upgrading hospitals and health facilities. $1 billion going to rural and regional capital works programs. Nearly $48 million going to Riot Hospital. The last winner, according to the ABC, flooded communities. So $3.3 billion to help communities affected by floods. More than $630 million goes to new and safe housing in the Northern Rivers and Central West. $207 million available for emergency responses, including more firefighters, and $2.4 million for statewide disaster response legal service. Okay, losers. Property investors. I don't know if they're ever losers, but anyway.
No, not really.
Land tax thresholds will be increased for 2024. Halt in indexing will mean people who own investment properties and holiday homes will need to pay land tax once their property values exceed $1.075 million. And that, of course, is a revenue-raising exercise by the government. That still would not offset, how much more property investors are earning in this country. Who are the prime beneficiaries of the housing crisis? Of course, it's property investors. So I cry no tears for them. Another loser is GST revenue. Well, okay, that always comes in because, WA is just simply getting too much of it. It's the long and short of that one.
God, oh dear Lord. No, dear Lord, we're not even getting our fucking fair share. Oh God, dear Lord, we're getting a percentage of our fair share. Oh God, we're losing so bad.
Yeah, we still are a net loss for our GST revenues. Our GST contributions are enormous in WA, and we still do not get anywhere near all of them back. Okay, and neutral is women. So the budget does include gender
I've never
equality.
seen a woman put it in neutral without grinding gears.
So the government says that despite the fact that, there is increased funding and programs for women, there are no women-specific health packages or initiatives that directly address gender inequality, as there were in last year's budget. Okay, but do you really need new ones every year? There comes a point you have to stop them, isn't there? But anyway. Okay, let's go to the New South Wales Liberal Party. So the former Treasurer and Energy Minister, Matt Kean, is resigning from politics. So he will not contest the next election, or is he? No, sorry, I think he's just dropping out of Parliament straight away. I mean, there was only recently a New South Wales election, so yeah, I think he is actually leaving early, obviously triggering a by-election in his seat. So that's the seat of Hornsby. Now, Matt Kean, of course, is someone we love to shit on here. He was a guy who said that the natural home for the Teals should be the Liberal Party. He basically says that the reason the Teals exist is because of a lurch of the Liberal Party at a national level to the right. And that could have kind of caused moderate Liberals to rebel and move to the Teals. I don't think so at all. That was due to demographic changes in inner city seats. Like I said before, very much like the American trend where urban centres started to become more to support the Democrats. Here in Australia, following a very similar trend, but they still kind of want neoliberal Liberal Party policy, economic policy, but at the same time, they want gay stuff and to fight climate change at the same time. That's the real reason you had the rise of the Teals. So yeah, I'm not sad to see.
It was the most purest expression of like, my daddy is rich and I am gay.
Yeah.
That was
yeah.
My daddy is rich, I am gay. That is the Teals. That should be their fucking political slogan. My daddy is rich, I am gay. I want to be able to afford poppers, go to the nightclub, get railed in the ass by like multiple different ethnicities, and still get, like my fucking inheritance without tax. That's the Teals.
Yeah, I think I mentioned before that I used to live in Nedlands, which, if you don't know, is one of our leafy upper crust suburbs here in Perth. And Julie Bishop was our member for Curtin, I believe, is the electorate there.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
And don't worry though, I was not living there because I was rich. I was living in it was funny. I lived on a street of
It's weird because you get student apartments, so you get like student priced apartments in Nedlands because it's right next to UWA.
Yes, so
yeah,
they were some of the people I got to know. I was quite young when I lived there, and I lived in believe me, I lived in a house that looked nothing like the quality of the other houses around us. But anyway, yeah, all of the UWA students and that I got to know around that area, they all voted for the Greens, like every single one of them, and all of them had like a specialist doctor parent, like a mum or a dad, or both of them,
voting for Liberal to be taxed less. There we go.
Yeah, who tended to vote for the Liberal Party, and
it's Hegelian dialectics.
Yeah. So that was the first time, I noticed that, that sort of political dynamic. It sort of confused me at first. Now I completely understand it, of course. But anyway, Matt Kean has announced that he is moving into the private sector. You know what part of the private sector? The green energy industry. What a surprise.
Oh, shit.
Okay, so back to federal politics. One Nation received a legal threat from Robert Irwin, who is the son of Steve Irwin, of course. You see him, he dresses exactly like his dad. Very much, I think, tries to
Yes, but he sounds like a fag.
He does.
Yeah.
And he's on some shit-ass reality show on Channel 10 at the moment. But he's also doing ads promoting Queensland tourism.
His grandfather is literally like one of us. I'm not even joking. And that's why, like, Bindi Owen and Steve's wife and him are saying, like, oh, we're distancing ourselves. We're never talking to our grandfather ever again because, the originally, was it like Arthur or Robert Irwin? The original zoo owner, the guy who actually owned like a small zoo, is basically was incredibly pissed off during 1973.
Over what?
1973. What ended in 1973 in this country?
I don't know.
The White Australia policy.
Oh, you mean, yeah, well, officially, yeah, under the Whitlam government.
Yes.
Yes, also, officially, that's true. But
when I was a kid, I got to talk to Steve Owen with my father, and my father even brought that up because, we were with my Rhodesian mother and etc. So that got brought up, and even Owen himself was just like, oh, yeah, he's got these ideas, but he wasn't really focused on business or the animals or etc. But like, I always understood, like that kind of thing.
Well, Steve Irwin was a liberal, as in a Liberal Party voter. He actually called John Howard the greatest leader in the world. I remember.
Yeah.
And when
he made his business easier, that's why.
When George W. Bush came to Australia and made an address to Parliament, you might remember Bob Brown heckled him. And Steve Irwin said that Bob Brown should have been taken outside and given a good beating. So I know that was Steve Irwin's politics. Yeah, I didn't know that about the granddad, though. But anyway, this legal threat by Robert Irwin, this is against One Nation. This was to do with using his caricature as a cartoon in, those Please Explain videos that they do, that One Nation produces. And this was basically...
They used a real name, though. They used a parody name. And even parodied his uniform,
Well, this is why I think
good luck getting that to stick, faggot.
Okay, well, look, I should point out that he actually issued them a deadline. He said, I want you to take this video down by this date, otherwise I'm going to be suing you for defamation. That deadline has actually passed, and no one has heard anything from him. So I think he's figured that part out. So it's not happening. But yeah, I think the reason why it was doomed to fail is that this actually wasn't really a parody of Robert Irwin anyway. If you watch it, it doesn't make fun of him, really. It simply uses his likeness. What it's a parody of is the tourism ad that he appears in. Because instead of highlighting all of the wonderful things there are to go and see in Queensland, it highlights all of the rotten things. Funnily enough, at one point, I watched the video earlier. My favorite point of the video was that, like, him and Bluey, the cartoon dog, they're both in it.
Yes.
They're traveling around in a Land Cruiser, and then the Land Cruiser gets hijacked by who they refer to as juvenile delinquents. Now, that's obviously a reference to the increase in youth crime in Queensland. But what's funny about it, if you have a look at the guy who carjacks it, it looks like an Aboriginal.
Well, yes. It's a juvenile delinquent. What the fuck do you think that is?
Yeah, I mean, it's, at the least, it's black. The character is black. But it did kind of look like an Aboriginal. So... So it's funny where, the controversial part about this is Robert Irwin rather than that. I find that surprising. So yeah, nothing's going to happen about that. Okay, let's move on to the Teals. Now, Climate 200. Remember, Climate 200 is the main financial backer of the Teals. They run all of these independents effectively as a political party because they have a common policy platform, but they're all run as independents. Now, they are apparently, well, no, not apparently, they have identified 9 seats that they're going to target at the next election. No surprise, these are all coalition seats. And this is, well, need I repeat the trend I was just mentioning before? These urban seats just becoming increasingly green. It's green liberals is what I like to call the Teals.
Don't call them green, just call them gay.
Yeah, well, look,
they're gay liberals.
In our next story, we're going to cover, that might be a better term. We're going to cover the electoral boundaries. I think I mentioned that briefly last week, that they have been redrawn. Apparently, that has been advantageous, or maybe advantageous to the Teals, because it's meant that people inclined to vote for the Teals have been inserted into coalition seats. So not all good news for the Teals, though, because the seat of West Sydney is being abolished. Sorry, of West Sydney, of North Sydney. I'm sorry, there is no seat of West Sydney. So North Sydney, previously Blue Ribbon, it was won by the Teals in the last election. Oh God, I'm sorry, what's her name? Kylie something. Kylie Tink.
There actually is a seat of West Sydney, actually.
Is there?
Yeah, it's called Beirut.
Okay, fair enough. No, but North Sydney was Joe Hockey's seat, so quite Blue Ribbon was.
The shadow treasurer Joe Hockey. Oh God. Yes. You fat fucking weird looking motherfucker.
Yeah. Anyway, that seat is being abolished, so that's obviously a blow to the Teals right there. However, that's the seat of Bradfield, of North Sydney, and that would mean that the surrounding seats that include seats like Bradfield would then go and absorb those Teal voters, those in the electorate that delivered North Sydney to the Teals at the last election. So that is part of why Climate 200 are eyeing off these seats now. Now, I still have to say, though, that I've said before that I predict the Teals are going to do badly in this election, and that's because of power prices. The cost of living will remain, there's no doubt, the number one issue on people's minds when it comes to casting their vote at the election. It has been for years now. And there's no doubt that people make the connection between green energy policies and higher power prices. And people know that the Teals are very, very supportive of fast-tracking us towards all-out green energy. So even though, all right, if you want to go by the 2022 data, where the Teals were delivered quite a number of seats, that doesn't factor in, that doesn't take into account the fact that a lot of those people who did vote Teal back in 2022 regret doing so. They're now thinking, why the hell did I vote for that party that is pushing on my power prices? So, okay, sure, maybe you've got Teal voters that are inserted into these coalition seats because of North Sydney being abolished and because of the electoral boundaries being redrawn. But, that we can't read those voters' minds. And if the polling is any indication, there's going to be a backlash against the Teals. Now, apparently, so we've got some new data to show that 6 of the Teals who won seats, of course, from the Liberals at the last election, apparently their voting records show them to be Labor aligned. So here's why. It shows that this data shows that the Teals voted in support of Labor bills during second reading divisions between 71% and 74% of the time in their first 2 years in Parliament. second readings, by the way, are basically the last readings that you have before a bill is voted. It's the reading that matters. So, of the second reading divisions they attended in the chamber, Sophie Scamps and Allegra Spender, Teals of course, supported the government's legislation 74% of the time, compared to 73% for Kate Cheney, 72% for Zoe Daniel and Monique Ryan, and 71% for Kylie Tink, who of course is in the now abolished seat of North Sydney. Now, however, put that into perspective here. Let's now compare that to other independent MPs who voted a majority of time with Labor. So Helen Hayes voted 73%. Zali Steggall, now they shouldn't have put her in this category because Zali Steggall is a Teal. For some reason, the Australian are not counting her as a Teal. I don't know why. So anyway, 71% for her. Rebecca Sharkey, 70%. She is of the Centre Alliance, which is like Nick Xenophon's old outfit. Di Lee, who of course took the seat from Christina Keneally, she voted 65% of the time. But get this, Bob Katter voted 54% of the time with Labor.
What?
Yes, believe it or not.
I guess those mad brutes really fucking dive deep.
Right. Now, Di Lee is also said to be kind of aligned to the right, yet she still voted 65% of the time with Labor. Bob Katter, of course, is also said to be aligned with the right, even though, he has some economic protectionist policies that, you could argue a left wing. But, leaving that aside, he did support the coalition back in 2010 when it came to the hung parliament, and he still voted with Labor the majority of the time. So just because you do vote with the government of the day in the majority does not necessarily make you aligned with them. A lot of the time it's just because of negotiations that you've made with them behind closed doors and other factors as well. Okay. Well, next story is on electoral boundaries, but I believe I pretty much completely covered that.
Yep.
Yeah. So I won't go into that anymore.
All right.
Quick story on politicians' pay. So they're going to receive
exogenous and also CPI controlled on a year-to-year basis.
That's right. So it is set at it's an independent body. Politicians are said not to have control over this really in any way. But anyway, new financial year, they're going to get a 3.5% pay increase. So that brings the base politician's pay. That basically
I love how this actually isn't tied to CPI whatsoever. Again, we've already talked about this, but it's not tied to CPI. It's not tied to the government's, presumption of how much, the Australian dollar has deflated, in the year and etc. No, it's a third body that goes out and does some tests and, comes back and says oh, yes, politicians' wages should be increased by this much, meaning they're fucking us.
Right. Well, actually, hold on. Something perhaps to counter what you're saying there. Yeah, you're right in terms of how the pay is set. But given the CPI has been higher for the last couple of years than 3.5%, which is the percentage that their pay is going up by, that actually means that their pay rise is, in relative terms, a pay cut because it doesn't keep up with inflation.
Well, good, because fuck them.
Right. Now, but at the same time, though, nurses and that are still only getting these measly 3% rises. So, their relative cut is still way more than what it is for politicians.
Well, what's the difference between a nurse and a helicopter?
What?
A helicopter gets more rises.
True. Now,
also, no one's been up in a helicopter. Or not everyone's been up in a helicopter.
Look, the other point to make, of course, is that, well, this is 3.5% on top of what is already very high pay. So to give you an idea, the base politicians pay, so that means like the lowest amount you would get entering parliament, like just as a backbencher with no, portfolio or parliamentary secretary role or whatever, is $233,650. And then at the highest end of the scale, which of course is the Prime Minister, Albo's pay is set to go to $607,500. Not bad. That's a fair bit over $500,000, so that's not bad at all.
Yeah, no, it really isn't. It really fucking isn't.
And, well, can I also point out that doesn't take into account things like perks and travel allowance, so free accommodation and flights and stuff that they get, and also the delightful parliamentary pension that you get at varying levels depending on your seniority as a politician when you leave Parliament. Certainly, if you're a former leader or Prime Minister, you're definitely not going to go hungry when you leave Parliament on that pension. No way. Okay. A quick story on education. The Victorian government is set to take submissions from survivors of abuse in government schools, particularly sexual abuse. So those who were abused by teachers, mainly coming from the state system. And this is part of, I hate this, what they call it, but a truth-telling process, a similar kind of...
Yes, the European blood libel process.
Right. I mean, it's mainly used for Aborigines telling lies about what white people did to them.
And God, they built these wooden doors out in the middle of Ayers Rock, and they let us in one by one.
Yeah. Okay, so this is going to be an independent review focusing on what happened in the public school system prior to the year 2000, and the stories of physical and sexual abuse. Now, one thing I'll say to defend boomers, actually, is that many boomers do have stories that are true about how teachers were violent. Because, even for a long time after, like, say, the cane was banned in schools, it was still tolerated of teachers hitting kids. They would get away with it. Because, I guess there just wasn't as big of a
kind of should not. I'm still on the fence about this.
Right, but it is true that boomers have those stories, though, about getting bashed by teachers and stuff. That's true.
K punishment. Yeah.
So, and dare I say that those stories would have more truth to them than the kind of bullshit that's being told at truth-telling inquiries for Aborigines about the stolen generation.
Okay, so like the stolen generations. Let's look at the black and white fucking letter law of like, or what law or policy was actually used to fucking enact the stolen generation. It doesn't match what's being said. Now let's look at the policy of schools back in the 50s. Your son will be caned. He'll be corporally punished if X, Y, Z, ABC. Yeah, whatever. But we have black and white letter documents saying for one thing, and no black and white letter documents saying for another thing. And do not fucking pull the orders were in the middle of the text with me, motherfucker. No, because the orders were saying oh yes, these the mixed Aborigine women and boys were getting beaten and killed, so they should be taken away. That's what it said.
And I mean, look, obviously you can't run away from the fact that the cane was legal in public schools, and that's just
punishment was illegal.
Yeah. I mean, this has some merit, even if they are somewhat exaggerating it or making too much of a deal about it. But okay, so social media. Now, I've seen at least 2 articles from the ABC effectively going against the coalition policy to ban people under 16 from accessing social media. It looks like the Labor Party may join the coalition in bipartisan support for this. They've made a lot of indications that they will. Now, the ABC profiled this guy called Leonardo Puglisi. If you don't know who he is the 16-year-old host of the online news channel 6 News that started when he was just 11 years old. He is making the point that under the coalition's proposed policies, he would never have been allowed to start that channel. To which I ask, would Australia really have been any worse off? I think that is a pathetic argument against the proposed ban. So certainly didn't win me over. Now, the other article that I noted here was they were talking about the practicality of the ban. Basically saying, okay, if you did ban them, would you be able to enforce it? So then they made a couple of points here. One was that, well, kids increasingly spend an enormous amount of time on their phones and tablets and laptops and whatever else. They socialize with many of their friends on there. They interact through entertainment and video games and whatever else. So they kind of said, well, look, you can't take that away from them because it's just such an integral part of their lives. To which I say, that's the point.
That is a depressing thing.
Right. That's the whole point. It's become too much a part of their lives. And that's why it needs to be scaled back. There is a reason why we have out-of-control youth suicide. Now, of course, it's to do with many other factors. Overall, you boil it down to a loss
look
of
at you, the
capital.
diplomat. No,
and I mean,
dude, fuck it. Like, we've made our fucking kids retarded. The internet has made our kids retarded. The internet has made our movement retarded. Since when, like, ask the 1.0s, like, even the 1.0s we've talked to, when did they have, like, such vicious fights with each other outside of the internet? It's unheard of. We're looking at fights between organizations that are, like, unseen by fucking God himself because of the internet. Because of, like...
Maybe they need Blair... Maybe they need Blair Cottrell to uppercut them.
Oh, God. No, but I was going to say, like, every single digital device you actually look at is a black shining screen. Like, dude... I know. That's just my, like, fucking little bugaboo, but yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, look, and we all have our own personal stories here. Like, pretty much all of us will admit, yeah, we look at our phones too much, Like, I'm certainly guilty of that. So, like, okay, if we can actually do something about it and do it early, so, in other words, get to kids before they just become completely consumed by the screen, well, that's a good thing. So, I mean, like this argument by the ABC, oh, well, look, they already spend a lot of time, like, on social media. It's like, yeah, that's the point. Like, they need to be removed from it. They spend way too much time on screens. Okay, now, the other one, of course, we always hear this one, is that kids are better than their parents with technology, I would say, like, that argument increasingly does not hold water. And the reason why is, well, who's having kids now? It's millennials. And millennials are tech savvy. Of course, boomers are not tech savvy. Xers are sort of in between. But the people having kids now are millennials and, to an extent, Zoomers. And they were people raised with the internet, and they do know how to work these devices out, and they do know how to impose blocks and bans on their kids to stop them from using social media and, other things. So I don't know if that argument quite holds up anymore. like...
I remember when I was, very young and, talking to my, older sister, and like, this was when MySpace was basically a thing for my older sister. I just escaped the MySpace era. I was in the Facebook era. But I remember my sister...
I never got on MySpace.
Yeah. Yeah, no. But the thing is, like, I remember her explaining to me, like, a girl got cyberbullied online and killed herself.
Over MySpace?
Yeah, like over the MySpace slash the start of Facebook. Yeah, and I just remember thinking that was such a novel concept, and over the course of my child to late teenage years, it stopped becoming a novel concept.
No, not at all now. I mean, yeah, we don't need to repeat it. I mean, it's amplified. And stories like that, kind of should show that we should have seen this coming, that the writing was sort of on the wall back then. And we've since let it just get it out of control. And as the ABC point out now, like, kids are just completely hooked on that stuff, which, yes, does make it difficult to get them to unplug. But that's all the more reason why we need to do something. Now, the last argument they've got here is that, well, we're also just not acknowledging the benefits that kids have from social media. So, they talk about, say, kids interacting on online chat groups to study for an exam or something like that, or the fact that they stay in contact with people and organize meetups and stuff like that. Okay, well, I would just say, what was life like before we did all of those things? Are you going to tell me that kids were were less social back then, or were more studious with their schoolwork back then? I don't think that adds up either. All right.
Not just kids. It's now that we've gotten to the point of a Gen X, raised with smart tablets, etc., perpetually online. At least millennials, had to wait for something, some kind of as fucking. At least millennials had to type in ASL. I'll put it that way. But no, Gen Z, dude, Jesus fucking Christ, it was just always open, always ready to go, and always fucking terrible. I don't know. I'm very fucking happy that there's now another generation of children from our people that can just fucking wipe this fucking place clean.
All right, so just two more stories for you. A quick one on defence, just to show you the deterioration of our Australian Defence Force. Our newest warship, the HMS Stalwart, broke down in Darwin and is being urgently repaired. So this is after less than 3 years of operation. And we can't even get our warships to operate properly now. And the other ones that we sell to Fiji get crashed into reefs. All right.
This is Australia.
All right, so we're going to end on things related to Brittany Higgins. So the defamation suit being brought by Lina Reynolds against Brittany Higgins and her partner, David Shiraz. We've got an interesting development, which is that Scott Morrison is likely to be called to testify as a witness at the trial. And the trial, by the way, is set to begin, I believe, at the end of July. So not too long more. He has already provided a witness statement to the court in favour of Linda Reynolds. Now, of course, we don't know exactly what it says. I imagine that it would relate to the toll that it took on Linda Reynolds. Reynolds recently said that yes, both the case at the moment and just the whole debacle generally is continuing to affect her health. Remember, she was actually admitted to hospital for minor heart problems when the story first blew up and she was getting grilled in the Senate over it. So, yes, it's fair to say that it not only took a mental toll, but a physical toll on her as well. So anyway, that trial is set to start, as I said, end of July, right here in Perth, and Morrison is likely to make a appearance via video link. Okay, now last story we have for you. So this relates to the Bruce Lehrmann defamation trial that he, of course, lost. Now, you might find this surprising, but Lisa Wilkinson, who was largely seen to have walked out of that case victorious, it has actually now announced legal action to overturn Justice Michael Lee's finding that her conduct in the Brittany Higgins story was improper and unjustifiable. So she's claiming that Justice Lee made more than 50 errors in his findings in the defamation case against both her and Network 10. Now, this says something about, remember when the lawyer for Network 10 basically came out and said this was an all-out victory for Channel 10 and an all-out loss for Bruce Lehrmann. What some people fail to remember is that Justice Lee actually had a lot of bad things to say about Channel 10, namely that the main thrust of the project story where Brittany Higgins was first interviewed was not that she got raped by Bruce Lehrmann, but it was that the Liberal Party attempted to cover it up. So Justice Lee said that this was wrong of Channel 10 to do. It was completely inappropriate and the evidence did not support the claim. And of course, he said that Lisa Wilkinson was complicit in that as well. So for those reasons, Lisa Wilkinson is now launching this legal action. So on top of that, Wilkinson says that Justice Lee correctly found that the defense of justification or truth had been made out. He should also make findings that Bruce Lehrmann had knowledge of Miss Higgins's lack of consent. So remember that Justice Lee simply found that Bruce Lehrmann was indifferent to whether or not Brittany Higgins was consenting. So they're picking out these other little things as well. They're nitpicking. And yeah, I find this quite extraordinary that even though, they walked out of there pretty much victorious with Bruce Lehrmann effectively left bankrupt, they're still not entirely happy with this and they're bringing it back to court. So there you go. Another saga in the story that is going to be interesting to watch.
Oh yeah, like a weird rape political shit show that has now been going on for about a year and a bit now.
Well, the rape, I think,
it's gone. Dude, that was fucking gone. It's gone at this point. It's fucking gone. Now it's just defamation and fucking oh god.
Yeah, I'm just wondering.
If I was Lemon, I would fucking hang myself too.
It does seem like this stuff is never going to end. We'll be forever covering this on the Racer. Okay, guys, that is where we will leave it.
Das wir uns nie wiedersehen.
I didn't think this episode would go so long, but anyway, hope you enjoyed it. We should be back with you in a week's time. So thanks for listening to episode 221. Check us out at theracer.biz, and we will see you soon.